Folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the immigration situation in Australia. So people wanting to immigrate to or migrate to Australia. Now, there's pretty much everywhere I look on social media, and particularly in say places like Britain, where there's this constant talk. If only we had the Australian point system. If only we had the Australian system, that would fix everything. You've got the skilled immigration points. The Australian. No, that is bullshit. Get it out of your heads. And I'd ask anyone who listens to this video to spread it as far and wide as you can, because this seems to be a deeply entrenched myth about the Australian immigration point system. Now, it does exist in name only, and if anybody wants to bother to go and look at the Australian government immigration website and look at the points that one gets or can be awarded for various situations, such as education and do you speak English, that type of thing. But if you go through that, it's fairly onerous. Not many people would make the grade there. Even people from other white countries that have got sort of qualifications, and speak perfect English and that sort of stuff, they would really struggle. And there are, there's if anyone's been convicted of any crime, for example, if you're 18 and you took a car to do a joyride or something like that, that's enough to have citizenship refused. And so it's not easy for people to make it. Now, I have not met more than a handful over many years, over more than 20, 30 years. I have not met any Asian or brown or black immigrant who would have satisfied and met that criteria in the point system. Again, a small handful. Pretty much I can go for like a whole year, and every immigrant I meet does not meet, and in many cases falls far short of any of meeting the criteria for immigration. So how can that be? If the point system is the criteria, if that's the deciding factor, then how can these people that meet little or none of it in many cases, how can they come to Australia if they don't meet this point system? So firstly, we need to accept that the point system exists in name only, and it's very selectively applied. It's applied ideologically. So it's a bit like Black Lives Matter can burn down a whole city, but no one gets charged or imprisoned. But if you misgender somebody and you're a straight white male Christian, you can have 2 carloads of police knocking at your door in seconds. So it's very ideological now. Now, we also need to look at the backdrop of this. The globalist program is to move as many brown and black people from the surplus populations of the world, places like India and Africa, from the surplus populations of the world into the white countries. That's the globalist program. And there's no arguing with that. That is the globalist program. So if a white engineer, so say an engineer from Germany wants to, he's a electrical engineer or mechanical engineer. His partner, his wife's an accountant, and they're both in their late 20s, so great age to have them come to Australia and procreate, and yet they somehow just miss out. There's not quite enough points. You look close, but not quite enough. And they're white, they're Christian, they're university educated, they're socialised into an urban society similar to Australia. They've got all the qualifications. They can pretty much walk straight into a job. Perfect. I mean, you'd go, wow, please come in. It's people like that that are going to make you, turn your country or keep your country rich. And so, no, they can't make it. But the illiterate Chinese peasant from the rural areas has only ever lived hand to mouth in a farm, a subsistence existence. They can get the visa to come to Australia So you go, wow, how can that be? How does this Chinese peasant meet the point system? They don't speak a lick of English. They've got zero qualifications. They've only ever existed in a barter subsistence existence in a farm out in the middle of nowhere. A rice farm. Why would you even want somebody like that in your country, let alone how did they make it through? Now, when the mass immigration began, which was a centre-right government, interestingly, that's kicked it off here in Australia, at least. When the mass migration began, the government, the governments in Britain and elsewhere around the world, assured us that assured the local population not only qualified people that speak good English and they've got qualifications and they've got where skills that are needed for the economy to grow and and yada yada, all that. So only those people will come in. So you no need to worry. Everything will be fine. It'll only be really skilled people and so on. Now, from day one, that was a brazen and grotesque untruth. That was never the case. Illiterate peasants by the fuckload started to arrive, principally from China, but many from India as well. The Indians often spoke a sort of a pidgin English, so they could kind of get by on that. But none of these people had first world qualifications or any qualifications for the most part. Well, they had the equivalent of, say, a trade college entry-level certificate in accounting or something like that. But again, from a third world country where everybody bribes the lecturer to get the bit of paper, like no one actually studies it and passes the test through a rigorous exam. Far from it. So these people were the ones who started flooding in. And they again, none of these people met other than the odd few, none of these people met the criteria that was the government was saying, well, you have to speak English. And I lost count to the amount of Chinese people that couldn't speak a word of English. I mean, how did you get in? And you look at the test that's supposed to be applied at the time. The test was supposed to be applied for English proficiency. And there's no way these people could have even attempted this test, let alone get through it and pass it. So clearly this wasn't the case. They were saying that, we've got all these rigorous standards in place. That clearly wasn't so. Now, if you look, there was a Australian government paper that was around, I guess a couple of years ago now, and it was an internal document that was somehow leaked to the media, but none of the media really touched it. A couple of the smaller stations sort of mentioned it, but I went and found it and had a look, and it said that in reality only 5% of the total immigration, so only 5% really meet any genuine criteria of English proficiency and skills, recognised skills, not some bullshit degree from the University of Ouagadougou in Africa or something. Not that, but an actual recognised, first world recognised qualification. So 5%. Now, even the 5% seemed to be a bit generous, I thought, in the interpretation, but cramming as many people as they could in there. But let's say it's 5%. But that means 95% not qualified. Now, again, coming across people that don't speak a word of English that somehow are managing to get in on, get into Australia when they meet, again, none of the criteria, but where there are many examples of white people that are being refused citizenship visas to Australia, even though they would be far, far, far better candidates to receive as migrants rather than these other people who come from vastly different cultures, don't speak the language, have no skills, have no qualifications. Many have never even lived in cities. Many have never even had a job before. Most of the Indians coming over here have never had a job before. But whatever work they get here is their first job ever in their lives. But if you look at the mix of people that are getting citizenship, they're coming in under 20 to 25% are refugees, and I'd question the refugee status for a lot of these people. That they may have left their original sort of tribal village in Africa and gone to a United Nations refugee camp, but they could have now gone back to their original villages. The civil war or the famine or something, that's finished now, and they can go back. But they either choose not to, or they coerced into it by United Nations agitators and globalist agitators to go to a first world country. Hey, you get a free house, you get free this, free load. So they think, wow, okay, all right then. Well, shit, why would I turn down all that free stuff? And they come from and they don't fit in. I mean, second generations, and they still don't fit in. Or some do, but not very many. So refugees are 20 to 25% of the total immigrant intake, depending on whose numbers you go by. 40 to 45% are like family reunions. So somebody from some Indian village gets rural village gets citizenship, and the very first thing they do is bring out as many relatives as they can. The uncles, aunts, the cousins, the second cousins, the entire fucking village comes out. And again, I don't know what benefit that is to Australia or the West, but it is what the globalists want: the movement of surplus brown and black people from wherever they're from into the West. That's what the globalists want, and that's what the government here that's globalist controlled is delivering, in spite of what they say about our point system and this. It's all crap. So then there's the rest that are supposed to be skilled migrants, but there's a list of skill shortages, which has more to do with cheap labor, effectively slave labor, than it has to do with anything else. So then there's a lot of we're talking dishwashers, cleaners and floor sweepers. These aren't skills, for fuck's sake. But the people that come in and do that, they're penniless rural peasants from wherever, and they'll happily live 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment because they've got electric lights, they've got running water, flushing toilets. That's way better than whatever they had from where they came from. So they'll 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment for them it's not bad. The roof doesn't leak and so on. And so they're the imported sort of slave labor, if you like. The other area where people are imported is it's the scam immigration fronts. It's where the Chinese restaurant or the Chinese or Indian business, the takeout food business, where they advertise for. So the way you have to do it is you have to advertise, I think, for 6 weeks, and you go to the government and say, look, I advertised for 6 weeks, nobody applied or nobody applied for the job, and then that's declared then as a shortage, that you weren't able to find somebody, and then you're allowed legally to bring someone in, like a sponsored sponsored worker migrant. So what these the Chinese, for example, what they do is they say in the advert that they want somebody who's got a very remote rural dialect, Chinese dialect, and only somebody who speaks that rare country, rural farmland dialect is acceptable for the job they're advertising. That's crap, of course, but that's the scam they use. Then they can quite legitimately go to the government, so the Australian government or the relevant department, and say, look, we've advertised for 6 weeks, we can't find anybody that meets that criteria. We'll have to import them. Then they just import any slave peasant they want. No one checks whether that dialect is relevant or anything like that. So it's a massive scam, and tens of thousands of people are brought out under this sponsored worker immigrant scam that goes on, and it's again tens of thousands are in that. The Indians are the same. They'll say that the offshore Indian investment firms buy up takeout food shops, and they can only make it work by paying peasant wages to their staff, and then they have to bring them out from India where they can intimidate them, turn them into de facto slaves. Pakistan, for example, today on the Indian subcontinent, they've got one of the biggest slave populations in the world. So the Indian business then advertises for a worker, and they just claim falsely or otherwise that they couldn't get any applicants, no one applied, or no one suitable applied for the job. And okay, you can bring in as many illiterate Indian peasants as you want. Now they're not bringing out workers, they're not bringing out sort of skilled workers here. They're bringing out peasants from some village in the middle of nowhere, and it's considered to be a great honour to be selected by these Brahmin goons. The Indians to be somebody from your village manages to get out to a first world country, because then you've got the chance that person will get citizenship and the rest of the village can come out to the first world country. So these people, these poor peasants, even band together and pay bribes to get their one of their sons or daughters selected for these scam jobs in the West. So a lot of them come out on that, but around 5%, and as generous, I think, are skilled. Now let's look at the genuinely skilled. Now let's look at the skilled people. Now I meet people like doctors and accountants and all sorts of people, administrative people in the public service, and I mean, maybe these people are skilled. I don't know, but you wouldn't know it. Doctors that barely speak a word of English and can't understand what you're saying, you can't understand what they're saying. I mean, how is that skilled? They've got a degree from some third world country. I mean, how is that skilled? A very corrupt, super corrupt third world country where, again, degrees are handed out based on how much, how many bribes you pay the professor or the lecturer. So, and some of these no longer have any bridging courses or competency tests that they go through. That's racist. So they're just waved in. You've got some. So you claim to be a doctor from the middle of nowhere. But now, by contrast, it's and I've spoken to people about this. It's incredibly difficult to check the bona fides of somebody coming to Australia from a third world country. If you're calling to check on the person, check on their bona fides or their background, it's very difficult to do. Firstly, does anybody speak English? Do you have to get a translator to handle it? If you communicate in writing, you don't get a response, and on it goes. These are people that are maybe the only way they'll respond to anybody locally is if they're bribed. So you call from overseas, then why would they give a shit? And so you don't get a response. You try and telephone. So it's very difficult to check the bona fides of these people. Now, if you've bribed or paid bribes to get a degree in some third world university, they'll still record it that you were issued with a degree. So it would appear to be bona fide on the surface, but. So it's very difficult to check those bona fides, unlike a white person from a first world country, where you can send, with much higher standards of rigor and honesty and so on, you can send a query to these white countries. Say, well, Billy Bob Smith's here and he claims to be a PhD and such, then you can verify that, and you can verify all that Billy Bob Smith claims, including, places he worked, things like that. So, but that same rigor can only be applied to white people from first world countries. It can't be applied to, or people from first world countries. It can't be applied to people in third world countries, or it is very, very difficult to do it. So these are some of the issues around these scams. So this point system that in Australia is supposed to exist, it exists in name only. And it only appears to be applied and rigorously applied to white people that speak English and do have qualifications. But when it's brown or black people, that they lower the bar to ground level. And there are even people. I mean, here's a couple from Pakistan, and they've got a young child, but she's they come from what you'd say would be upper class Pakistani family, and they wanted to move to the West. They both speak decent enough English, good enough. I mean, it's not excellent, but it's good enough. And they both had what I would call sort of fourth tier, low level qualifications. I doubt they're actually qualified in I think with her it was supply chain or something. With him, it was some sort of technical thing, computer software coding, maybe. I think it was with his case. Now, I would be very suspicious of those alleged qualifications, given they're sort of in the upper end of the middle class. That they were reasonably sophisticated, I guess, and they were urbanized, so that's something. But they're, again, they bring nothing to the country. They don't have qualifications that are unavailable here. They don't have superior qualifications. They don't have work skills. They both worked in really sort of family businesses that were invented. You know, the family has sort of as part of some monopoly in a local area, so they've got no concept of what actual commercial business in a capitalist society is like. So they lived off cosy government contracts that were part of a corrupt round robin of bribes and payments and so on. So they've got no idea what it's like to be in a first world country and be held to certain standards. But they were, particularly her, was outraged that they should be even questioned, or that they should even have to answer any questions. We're a upper class Muslim Pakistani family, and we're used to people doing as they're told. We tell other people, they don't tell us. And I thought, why would you want somebody like in this country? They seem nice enough, I guess, in their way, but they bring nothing. And yet they're able to, with their piss poor and very dubious qualifications, again, acceptable English, they're able to jump the whole queue and get visas, and now they're citizens here. I don't follow that. There are far better options of citizens from other Western countries than there are, that you do getting them from fucking Pakistan. But and something I've mentioned many times now in other videos about my personal experience with hiring, Indians and Chinese, or anyone from the third world, and hiring them, they invariably do not have the qualifications they claim to have. They do not have the expertise they claim to have. Now, whether they work here or there, that's sort of immaterial to me to some extent. I only care about can they do the work, and they claim they can, and they've got these advanced, triple PhD type qualifications, and I've got CVs from Chinese people, and they look very impressive. So I bring them in to interview, and the HR person will come back and say that person couldn't speak a word of English. I said, "What are you talking about? They've got a like a PhD in such and such." No, couldn't speak a word. They couldn't communicate to me. I couldn't communicate to them. Go, well, wow, how did they get this degree? And you do some preliminary checking, and you find they actually haven't got it. And again, they misunderstood how the first world works. They just, if all they need to do is assert that they have something, and in the Asian country they came from, they just pay a bribe to somebody and everything would be sweet. And they seem rather confused that it's a little bit different here than when you say you've got a degree, or say you have certain skills, in particular that you actually are meant to have those skills. And it'll be found out very quickly if you don't. And particularly the Indians and the upper class, the Brahmin Indians, they're very much caught up in a world of social status and prestige and the philosophical superiority of their existence and that type of stuff. So they seem genuinely put out when they're asked to prove that they know what they claim they know. So say in the case of having a PhD in computer science, and they're experts in coding this and that computer language, and I'll be sitting down with the head of the coding department and say, all right, then show us what you can do. Cut some lines of code. And they seem utterly shocked when they get this, and they try and bluster their way out of it. I'm too important socially. I'm too prestigious to lower myself to your questions. That's not how it works, buddy. So anyway, so the Australian point system exists in name only. and whatever rigor it does possess is applied only to white people and well-qualified white people. And for everyone else, the brown and black peasants, the bar is lowered. And again, if there's even 5 out of every 100 of the total immigration intake in Australia that's actually economically useful to the economy or useful to the economy, then that would be a generous interpretation. I would say it would be around half of that. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.